I got these slides up for you. So as we go through, if you have a specific slide you want me to pull up, you just let me know and we'll get it. Cause I know that you said, I thought it was funny because you said, I'm an engineer, not an orator. You're doing great so far, but you're right. Sometimes those visual aids are helpful. Although there's only 25 people watching on Facebook and YouTube this morning, which is, I don't know where everybody is, but we'll add to it, and you can send people back to watch the show later on Facebook if you want, and there you go. So we can get it done. How's the fam taking this, Cole?
It's definitely a team effort, that's for sure. I have a very understanding and patient wife who is fully supporting me in all of this, because it is it's pretty challenging to be able to travel so much and get out, especially with the size of District 36, and raise the family at the same time. So one thing I have learned so far is that in this House race, or just any candidacy, is that individuals fail but teams survive. So we're doing pretty well. We're rolling with the punches and whatnot, and we're just making the best of it.
Yeah. Well, no, it is definitely a challenging situation. I've never run for state office, but I have run for local office, and I know that sometimes it's just as hard on the spouse as it is on you because of things that are going on. It makes it, definitely makes it. Audrey thought that was a great sideline there for you to say not an ass but an S. So it's all good. I want to, how far are we here? We're 90 seconds from rejoining, so we're not going to get too far into it. In the commercial breaks, I tend not to get too deep in the weeds because we don't want to have to repeat for the podcast listening group, but it's good to see. Have you had a chance to talk to any of your competitors at this point, or are you just kind of getting a feel for things, or what are you hearing here? We got less than a minute.
On the District 36 Republican interview, did get to talk to Pam. She was in there. Not a lot on specifics of how everything's going to shake out. So not a lot of contact with the competitors, no.
Okay. I'm just curious as to how it goes. I mean, you got Pam, who's out by Delta. You got Rebecca Schwenke, who's down in Glen Allen. You got Dana Mock, who's out in Fort Greeley, Delta as well. And it's kind of crazy out there. It's kind of all over the place. It is a huge district. There's no two ways about it. It is a huge district. A lot of work. All right. Well, that's the 30-second warning. So we're going to run back into it, get things ready to go. Please like and share, like and follow, subscribe, ring the bell, do all the things on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Wherever you're watching, you can share it. So just do it. Let's get more people involved in the discussion. We're going to continue with Cole Snodgress here on the program. District 36 candidate. You can visit his website again, Cole for House 36. Let's do this.
Public enemy number one. Oh, wait, sorry. Public enemy number one, which makes more sense. On the other hand, he's a little bit of a pain in the Michael Duke show.
I am not. I'm not a pain. I'm not a pain in the thing. By the way, I've been saying Cole Snodgrass. It's not ASS. It's ESS. Snodgrass. So my bad on that one. So apologies to Cole. I've already abased myself on this on the other side. Cole, let's talk a little bit about some of the issues, some of the biggest issues. And I think the thing that I really want to talk to most candidates about is the size and scope of government. And of course, in that conversation is the discussion of the permanent fund dividend. So what's Cole's position on the permanent fund dividend? Where do you sit on that? What should we be doing? Is it, is it 50-50? Is it 75-25? Is it the old statutory formula? And, how do we make that work? Give us your take on this.
Well, we already have a law in the books, and it's called the statutory PFD. And if the consent of the governed isn't able to follow the law, then that opens up a whole host of issues. That is a defining mark of a republic. So for me on the PFD, there's quite a bit of issues behind it rather than just saying, okay, you got another big check PFD guy here. There's a lot more going on in the background, I would say, when you start dipping into the PFD. The permanent fund dividend in and of itself is the people's connection to the natural resource, wealth, and development of the state. And we are seeing that being consumed by the government spend from the last about 10 years or so. What it's really doing is the growth of our government is being connected more and more to the investment revenue category, which is what the permanent fund brings home. And that is currently right around a $77 billion fund that sits outside of our state. It works outside of our state, and it brings home an investment. That is not an actual reflection of what's going on here at home for the local economy. So when you start dipping into these investment revenues as saying, okay, we're going to fund our state government on that. If you look at any income distribution curve, when you take a fixed dollar amount as a tax away from the people, you're always going to hit the middle and the lower end of this income spectrum the hardest with a set dollar amount rather than a percentile based revenue generation. So yeah, that one's a pretty good graph there. And so I got really curious on to saying, okay, what are the demographics? How is this actually, affecting people? And one of the 17 regards of grievances that we have in the Declaration of Independence is no taxation without representation. I'm not for lowering the voting age, but there's also an age group out there that is subsidizing the state spend with their PFDs, and that is the age group of those who are less than 18. So I went back a fair amount of years to just kind of graph that out and to see how much of the applicants of those who are under 18 and how much do they contribute to the state spend. The 2024 numbers aren't out yet, but in 2023, you had under 165,000 applicants of those who are less than 18, and they contributed over $406 million through their PFD cuts to the state spend. And they have no voice, and they can't say anything about it, but yet they pay.
Right. I mean, it is a tax. I mean, Matt Berman from ICER said it, in his article in the ADN. He's a professor of economics and part of the ICER team at the University of Alaska. He said, this is in everything but actual name, this is a tax. And that's what we've been talking about here on the program, and people scream and yell, and it doesn't fit this definition or this esoteric thing. But you're basically taking money away from people that was intended by law and by the implication of the legislature to belong to the people. The government already got its cut. This is the people's cut of that money, and they've been taking it away. So you believe in the full statutory PFD as originally written, not the Hammond 50-50 split, but the original statutory PFD. Is that what you're fighting for? Are you willing to take a look at the 50-50, or what? I mean, where do we go from here?
I want to get back to the original 1982 formula. It's worked for a long time. Just add up the 5 years of the net income, multiply by 21%, divide by 2, minus expenditures to run the PFD, divide by the number of eligible applicants. It's pretty simple and it's pretty straightforward. The underlying issue of saying, well, we need to have more of the investment revenues go towards state government is we're shifting the focus of the state government of how it can support and grow the private sector. Instead, we're just saying, well, I think if we kind of strategize, work around these hoops, we can get more of an investment revenue into the state coffers. But really, we're ignoring the big question is, how can we grow our way out of our revenue shortfalls? What does the private sector, our businesses, and our industries need to grow? And as we can see, even in the spring revenue forecast, kind of look back at 10 years of state revenue and then also the 2025 projections. And we can see that the private sector is going to be contributing less and less and less to the state spend. And the investment revenues are going to be growing more and more, and federal receipts are going to be going up. So for, fiscal year 2023, we had about 32% of the state revenue was supported by the private sector. This year, it's 27%. And in 2025, it's projected to be 24%. So we're seeing a projection of decline of what a private economy is actually going to be contributing to state government. But yet alone, we're going to see the state revenue is going to be growing. And that's off the investment revenues and the federal receipts that are going to be coming in. So we're actually already seeing and planning on a shrinking of the economy rather than saying, what can we do as a state government to repeal those barriers that inhibit growth of our businesses and our industries, let alone so that they can continue to operate into the future. But what are we doing as a state to make this place a much more economical, attractive option to attract outside investment into the state? Natural resources development is extremely expensive here in Alaska. That's due to our geographical locations, our climate, and access to those resources. It's hard,
Right.
but those barriers can be overcome. So it's definitely concerning that I see, and I'm definitely going to be the growth. I want to be the most growth-minded candidate I can possibly be to say we need to connect the interests of the state government back to the private sector and grow our way out of our shortfalls. And that is going to take a long haul to do that. These things don't happen over the course of 1 to 2 years. Quick, we can get it solved and fixed. This is going to take 10 plus years to start growing our way out of our revenue shortfalls.
It requires some long-term planning here, long-term thought, and some vision down the road. For those of you who are listening on the radio, Cole had provided me a few slides here, and we're using them in conjunction with that on the Facebook and YouTube. So if you want to go back and watch this, there are some slides that we have up there. And one of the things, again, you were talking about here is the squeezing of the personal and private sector contribution to the state economy and the government. And we've had lots of discussions. I think it was Rob Myers who originally, made the mention and kind of pointed out that with what we're doing with this dependency on the investment revenue coming from the permanent fund itself, that's what the state, as oil declines, they depend more and more on the POMV draw and the investment revenue that they're drawing out. It creates this disconnect between the public and the private economy. And where it doesn't really matter what happens in the private economy to legislators, to the government, because that's not where their funding is. Every other state, they've got some form of state tax or something like that. And so they're drawing their operating revenue from the people, from the economy, from the commercial businesses, from, fees and all these other things. And so they are very cognizant of what's going on in the private economy. But in Alaska, it's like they almost don't care. Am I wrong? Or is there a disconnect, and is that going to cause a problem?
Well, I think the information that we can see from the past 10 years and looking into the future is pretty clear that the focus is on investment revenues and how much federal dollars can we bring in here. So I kind of see it as like, well, we need to start doing things where we can start growing our way out of our shortcomings rather than just saying, well, let's just continue on. Because if we continue the pace from 2023 to 2025, 26, 27, 2030, 2032, that ain't going to be looking so hot. You can even see that in the governor's 10-year forecast that he put out, where you're going to be deficit spending in the CBR, the Constitutional Budget Reserve, is going to be out and empty by 2028. Then what are you going to do? And then it starts to show the decline, because he has inserted the full statutory PFD in there, and you can see the effect that's going to have on the state spend. Right. So really, the replacement revenues are going to be being talked about and whatnot, because if you say, okay, you're going to go back to a full statutory PFD, that's a large item of the state spend, and where's the rest of that money going to come from? But what a replacement revenue would do is actually connect more and more people on an equal level playing field to the state spend, where people are going to start realizing, asking, what is going on with the state spend? Why is it so high? And why am I paying for all of this? So it'll actually engage a lot more people by going back to the full statutory PFD. And on top of that, if it is through the consent of the governed, through the legislatures, that the state spend must be this, then a replacement revenue will engage a lot more people to get them talking and saying what's actually going on down here in Juneau.
Right. And of course, with that and when we say replacement revenue, we're talking about some form of taxation to fill the coffers instead of taking that portion of the POM of the PFD away from the people. It's essentially what's going on, and it means fees or taxes or some other form. Now, my contention has always been, and of course, talking with Brad Keithley about this, my fear is, okay, so we do create some form of tax or fee or something that's going to increase those revenues, but that the legislature, just like, Parkinson's principles, government spending expands to fill up the entire available money supply. My fear is if we find some other form of revenue that could offset to give us that PFD, they'd still just take it anyway. So there's a key factor in there that you talk about on your website platform, and that, of course, is some form of spending cap. What's your vision for that?
Yeah, so just to be clear, without spending caps or replacement revenue, it's just going to be simply adding coal to the fiscal train that's headed for a wreck. A spending cap, I would say, needs to be dynamic where it's percentage based. And what it would do, it was actually tie a certain percentage of the government spend directly to the private sector that it cannot exceed. So it's going to start shifting the interest of the state government towards what is in the best interest of the private economy, which is actually all of us working Alaskans here at home. It's not just big business or these big corporations and you just want to help everybody, help them out. No, it's the individual Alaskan that our state government needs to have the best interest of mind in saying, how can we grow our way out of our shortfalls? Because when the private economy grows, then the state revenue grows. And you're going to be able to do that through a spending cap that is going to be directly related to a percentage of the private economy.
We're talking with Cole Snodgress here, who's a candidate for House District 36. We've been talking about the PFD and the budget, and we're running out of time for this segment. But Cole, I guess, so again, just to snapshot it for folks out there to give them to summate, you believe in the full statutory PFD. You realize that there probably going to have to be some kind of new revenues that would be generated on that because it is a huge amount of $700 million that would have to be offset in some way, but only if there is some kind of spending cap in place to prevent them from, again, exemplaring Parkinson's principles and expanding and spending all the money that's there anyway. So that kind of summates kind of what we just went over. Do you believe that the size of government is too big, too small, just right, Goldilocks? I mean, what are your thoughts on where we are on government here on the spend?
Well, we have to live within our means. And currently through dipping into the PFD, we are not. So we have a very large size of government. And, cuts are always a hard thing to talk about. No one really likes to. That's because there's a person on the other end of where those state dollars get spent. And it's not an easy topic. It's not a fun thing to do, but it's a necessary thing that needs to be done. If you look out 10 years from now, there's a problem. And deficit spending is not an option that this state can afford to have and bear, let alone the private economy uphold that, especially if we're not even breaking 30% of state revenues coming from the private economy this year in 2024, and let alone 2025. And what does 2028, 2029, 2032 look like?
Right. Well, what do the projections already tell us? The projections already tell us we're in deficits in the next 24 months. We're already in huge deficits, and it just looks worse from there. That's the biggest challenge here. Cole Snodgress is our guest. We're going to continue with him here in just a moment. When we return, we'll talk about some of the other hot button issues that we've seen in this past legislative cycle, including education, defined benefits, and more. The things that are going to come back. We know they're like the zombies. You can't kill them. They just keep coming back again and again and again. Cole Snodgress, Cole 4 House 36. Cole, the number 4 House, number 36.com. You can find him on the web there. And we're going to talk about that in just a moment. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
I got to say, Cole, it feels like a Tuesday, man. We're getting wonkish down here, but we kind of need that, right? I mean, you were the first candidate that's ever hit me with graphs and charts and discussed things like, selection of OMV draw. And I mean, we got down into the weeds there. I love it personally. I love it. But I mean, people just be like, huh? I mean, I just don't see them dissecting things quite as well as you said. And I'm with you. We've grown the size and scope of government too much. But Cole, 25 years I've been griping about we don't have a revenue problem in this state. We have a spending problem. Unfortunately, if you get elected, you're going down there as, there's a handful of people who believe with you. The rest, there's just no political will to cut the size. Because, like you said, there's always somebody, oh, we wouldn't want to hurt poor Johnny. Well, Johnny's the only person in the whole state being served by this $600,000 program. Maybe we ought to just kind of, should we just write him a check for $100,000 and shut the program down? I mean, come on. It's kind of crazy. There is no political will to get to this point. And I fear that the only time the political will get there is when the yogurt has hit the oscillating rotor, and then it's too late.
That's true, Michael. There is a short amount of time to start righting the ship, but it's getting smaller. That time is shrinking fast. Yeah, it's definitely a spending issue. I mean, that's why things keep growing. And if you want to spend more, well, you need to make more and bring in more. But the disproportional amount that we have of what we're pulling from the private sector is so small that if once we run out of money, you're going to have a bite size of a private sector that's about this big. And then you're going to have this heavy hand of government funding that's going to need to take place. And it's going to be, okay, who's going to pay? Who's going to pay anymore?
Right.
We already have a small group of natural resource developments. You got the petroleum, then in the non-petroleum, you've got a couple mines scattered around. Then you have all of the local economies and suppliers and the businesses and industries that take place. And once that investment revenue is gone, I don't see how our private sector is going to be able to support the state spend. And then that's just going to lead to people just leaving straight up, saying, well, it's more attractive in the lower 48. It's a lot easier living down there. I know what it's like. I know exactly how nice it can be in January down in the lower 48. And then let alone say, well, things are really expensive up here. There's not a lot of job opportunity and growth. I experienced that in 2017. Even with 10 years of mining on my resume and a degree, still had to pack my bags and head south.
Yeah, no, look, I've talked about the negative reinforcement loop that this could be, this downward spiral that it could create if they go if they wait till the last minute to put the funding of government onto the people. Well, you now have a smaller group of people that you have to spread this burden out over, and they're all like, oh, this tax burden is huge. So some people leave, which leaves a smaller group of people to carry that same burden. It increases the per capita. And then a few more leave. And then it's this self-licking ice cream cone where all of a sudden you got 3 people paying all the money in this to try and fund state government, right? I mean, it's the reduction to the ridiculous, but that's where we're at. You've got to slow the train down now. You could see the damn tracks are out. Please grab the brake handle and pull it instead of shoveling coal into the box. And that's where we're at. That's what we've been doing for 20 years in this state.
You're not wrong. That's definitely
Sorry, I don't mean to get wound up, but you've hit on the hot button. I mean, this is the key issue in the state. If we don't live within our means now, then in 10 years, we will have gone too far forward to go back. The inevitable crash will happen, and then it hurts everyone, not just the person on the other end of that program, not just the bureaucrat, not just the private sector, it hurts everyone. And it's 100% preventable. That's the worst part. It's 100% preventable. You're going to die from cancer in 10 years. It's 100% preventable. You did nothing. Who do you have to blame? I mean, that is a harsh reality in what we're dealing with right now.
Definitely. That sums it up really well. One way you can start growth, though, is you just got to start somewhere. We got into this mess and where we're at now through incremental, steady spending increases. And it's going to take that same incremental approach to start weaning ourselves off and getting down there. So I think when we get back on the air, we can dive more into those right. Issues and how we can do. But no, I'm a big natural resource guy. I know what it takes to develop them here in the state.
Yeah.
I'm definitely all for that. We need to start looking at ways of how we can grow or start growing. Just start. Got to start something and get moving.
Here's a bit of an ego booster. I think Donna Ardwin says Cole sounds a lot like Ben Carpenter and Rob Myers. I think I'd wear that as a badge of honor. I think that's a pretty good. Deal right there. All right, Cole Snodgress is our guest. We're going to continue here. Again, you can find him at Cole4House36.com. It's under his name there. You could see it on the screen. We're going to continue the Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, do the things. Let's get this done. Hooah!
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Huh. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
Okay, Cole Snodgress is our guest, candidate for House District 36, which is the seat currently held by Mike Cronk. It's a huge district. I mean, you slap a couple states together, I think they're still smaller than District 36. Like West Virginia and Rhode Island together, I think are still smaller. All right, Cole, we were just talking during the break that, something's got to change, and we've got to pull back the throttle now before we get too far to go back. I mean, that's kind of where we're at. If we can reach a point to where we can fix it, we're rapidly approaching that spot where no matter what we do, we're going to crash unless so you have kind of a plan, right? I mean, you've got a plan. You were talking about, going back to the statutory PFD, creating a spending cap, generation of some kind of new revenues, whether it's, taxes or fees or something, and of course the reduction in size and scope of government. How do you plan on making that? How do you plan on selling that to your fellow legislators? Because heretofore, not been a lot of political will to shrink down Uncle Sugar here in the state.
Well, it's kind of a two-lever approach. You're going to have the lever that's throttling back, and you need to grab that growth lever and start pushing that forward. Just start somewhere. It needs to be, we incrementally got into this problem, and we need to incrementally shift our way back towards a budget that is sustainable, and we need to grab that growth lever big time. Right now, it's really expensive to develop it's really expensive to develop our resources, and we need outside investment to do that. That's just a fact. Especially I can only speak in the non-petroleum revenue, but in mining, a lot of that money comes from Bay Street, Toronto. And when it comes on up here to operate every year, that's not just something like, oh, there's, $400 million laying around in the state. Let's just go operate, and get some gold out of the ground. That comes from outside. So we need to change our attitude of how we attract outside investment to develop our natural resources, and you employ the locals here at the economy that do that job. And, one way is you've got the fourth highest corporate income tax in the state. And when a lot of businesses are going to look at the outside, they're going to be like, yeah, well, that sounds like a really great deposit that you have there in Alaska. But I'm going to get hit with royalties. I'm going to get hit with a big income tax, and I'm going to get hit with probably a huge property tax too. And they're going to say, well, it's going to take a couple $100 million to develop this project. Yeah, guess what? I can invest those dollars in the lower 48. I can invest those dollars in Chile. I can invest those dollars in Brazil, Africa. So we need to make ourselves a more competitive state to attract that outside investment, and as well as starting on the local small level. One thing I like to do is gold mine by day, but then under the midnight sun, I like to develop, and we work our land here and trying to make it a full functioning farm here. I just have under 60 acres that are cleared and almost fenced in and done. And I'm a huge proponent of the food sustainability and independence that we have here. And one way you can start growing is through farming as well. It's expensive to do it up here, but we have a huge disproportion of the amount of food that we consume here and what is actually grown here and what is actually imported. That's the big flip there. So
right.
Getting the resources that are currently held by the state into the hands of the private sector, and that's as far as it goes. Don't get into the subsidizing of production. That's where the state stops. But we need to focus on how can we grow our way out of our shortfalls, and that's going to be through, starting in Title 38, Chapter 5, start reforming a lot of those codes and whatnot, of unhinging the DNR's hands, because right now the commissioner and the director are like this. They got their hands pretty tied of what they can do to get state resources turned over to the private sector, not into the subsidies, but into just turning it over, providing the infrastructure that's needed to develop our resources and turn them loose and let them go.
Let the free market work at that point. Let people decide and do what they need to do. some of the big issues that we faced this year, of course, was education. Education is the number two budget item as far as spend, $2.2 billion plus dollars overall. I think I don't know, maybe the final number was 2.4. I mean, it's huge. It's a huge number, but it's not enough. It's just not enough, Cole. We keep hearing that. It's just we flat funded it. We're not doing. I mean, you've seen it. You've seen the whole debate and the debacle. What's your take on the educational components of what we're talking about here?
One thing I've learned in the private sector is you pay for responsibility. You want more money? What's the responsibility going to be? I've definitely gone back to 2016 to 2024 and broken down the education budget of what actually makes it to instruction, what is consumed in admin and support, ops and maintenance, and other. And I put that chart in there. And then I also did a secondary axis where it broke it down, the percent that actually makes it into the classroom. That's called percent instruction. And at nowhere do I see it breaking 60%. So 60 cents of every dollar isn't quite, is spent on instruction, and then the rest is being consumed elsewhere. And then you also have to have a secondary talk of saying, well, I need this much money to operate. In the private industry, if I go and ask for more money, I'm going to get asked 2 follow-up questions. It's going to be, what is going to be my return and when is going to be my return? And you have to make a business case for it. So one thing I put together was a graph showing the state spend of how much we spend on education and what is our proficiency rates. I've been to some town halls where we don't have the starting point of the information that's collected, and those conversations can quickly get heated. And I understand why. It's because we have such a great love for our children and we want the best for them. And we have a constitutional mandate to provide for public education. And I want to just always start the conversation off of, okay, this is what we're spending, and this is the return that we're getting on our investment. And a good measure is through proficiency rates of students. What does that look like over from 2017 to now? So I was able to kind of chart the data out and let the information speak for itself as a starting point of how we can navigate that conversation. And in 2 instances, I see in 2017 and in 2022 to 2023, where the overall state spend went down and proficiency rates went up. I'm an engineer by trade, not an educator. I will be asking people, what do you think happened during those 2 years? What did we do as a state to get those proficiency rates up when budgets went down? What was going on? What worked? Because it clearly shows something worked. I'm an engineer, not an educator. So I ask other people, what worked? What did we do? Because we did something right here. We saw growth. Incremental growth is what we need.
Right. I mean, we saw a $50 million, $100 million dip in education spending, and yet the proficiency continued to increase. And yet after that, going all the way up to 2023, the growth has continued up and up and up and up, and it continues to fall. And even when they try to put educational markers into a bill where there's some kind of accountability for what's being spent and, what is the results, there's pushback. There's all this pushback. So, I mean, is it really more dollars, or is it, something different? Is it the way that we taught? Is it the way that, is there been a fundamental change in the way we've done things that doesn't have to do with money, but does it have to do with the actual fundamental underpinnings of how we're teaching?
Yeah, no, I think there's definitely room for reform here, just from what the information is showing. Now, I want to be clear. It's not that you go into the classroom and you take the ruler from the teacher and say, I will measure against you on your performance. You need to step back. One thing I've learned in the private industry, step back and take a look at, 1 to 2 steps above the teachers. And that's where the accountability picture really needs to come into play of saying, here's your budget, here's your target. How are you utilizing the public's funds, and how are you utilizing our teachers? Our teachers have a very high standard to even get a teaching job. They got to do high school, then they got to get a 4-year degree, and some of them even have masters and more. So they're very qualified, knowledgeable people who really have a heart for teaching the youth and ensuring and seeing that growth take place. So the accountability piece isn't directly coming to the classroom with the ruler. You got to step back and say, okay, a couple steps up from the teachers. How are you utilizing the teachers that you have in your district, and what are you doing with the public funds that have been sent your way? Another thing I like to show is, as soon as you talk about education, it immediately just comes to saying, oh, the students and the teachers, the students and the teachers. One thing I did like to graph and break down is, okay, what percent of the state budget is spent on teachers? What percent of the state budget is spent on admin and support? And as you can see throughout the years, especially kind of in 2019, really to now, you're starting to see a larger and larger growth in admin and support spend versus teacher spend. So if the problem is that our teachers aren't making enough, I think there's plenty of room within our budget to rearrange and reform and say, okay, if the problem is that the teachers need more, then let's shift the budget around within the set dollar amount and get it to where the problem is.
Yeah. Cole Snodgress is our guest. We're talking with him about his run for office. I got about 90 seconds here left for the radio here, Cole. So let me give you a chance to make your elevator pitch. You run into somebody, you're running for office, tell them why they should vote for you over everybody else, and where they find out about you. Go.
Well, when it comes to the Second Amendment, big or small, the Constitution protects them all. I'm unequivocally pro-life. There are only two genders. Bathrooms, sports, and locker rooms correspond to the way you're created by your maker. Truth matters. Everything I say and do, I will have to give an account to my maker one day. And parents determine the form of education for their children. It shouldn't be that there's only one state option out there. So I'm a growth-minded candidate. I definitely know what it takes to develop natural resources in this state, and we need to pull back on the spending lever, but at the same time, we need to grab that growth lever and start growing our way out of our revenue shortfalls. One thing I would like to say is come August 20th, go to the poll and vote for Cole.
Go to the poll, vote for Cole. Cole Snodgress, Cole4House36.com. Cole, great stuff. I appreciate you coming on board. Thank you for being part of it. And we'll see you down on the trail, okay?
Michael, thank you for having me.
All right. Hold the line for just a second. Folks, we're out of time. Mike Shower up next, The Michael Duke Show. Okay. Oof, man. It was like taking a sip from a fire hose. It's all good stuff. You should put together like a blog post or something on your website that has, because people are asking, where do we get these charts? And you should put up like a post on your website that it describes each one of these as a factor and throw them up there. I think that would be a great place to point people to say, here's the problem, and here's the charts, and here's the source material. I think that would be great. I'm with you, Cole. We need to develop more resources in this state. We need to necessarily get government hands, kind of out of the mix in some ways, getting more stuff into the private hands. We've got 73% of the state is controlled by the federal government. We got 27% that is split up between the state, the native corporations, and the private sector. And the private sector only makes up for something like 1.5% of all of that land. The wealth is in the land. We could do that, but we can't get government out of the way. We can't get the feds to release more money to the state. We can't get the state to release lands to the people. It's a hellacious problem, for sure. And I just don't know how we get people to see that mindset, because I think a lot of people just want to see Alaska locked up as a national park, and they don't want anybody here to do anything to anywhere.
It'd be extremely sad to have it more and more just locked up. But looking at what's really holding us down, what are these barriers? And I find a lot of those in Title 38, Chapter 5, of how we can start getting land turned over to the people and into the private sector. So it's very disproportionate. The size and scope of our economy is directly related to how much land is actually in the hands of the private sector. When you look at state land and you look at private land, you can see which one's growing, which one's producing, what's going on each and every year, especially in the farming realm. It's the one that's in the hands of the private economy. If you look at an overall view map of Delta, you can see, wow, there's a lot of private land there. And oh yeah, it must be back to state or government land.
Right. No, it is frustrating to see, and I'd like to see there's so much land that has been platted and planned by the state. Money's been invested, subdivisions have been pulled together and subdivided, and then they've been sitting there for 30 years. They haven't opened it up for land sales. They haven't, and it's just like this piecemeal thing, and that nobody knows about. It's and like you said, for growing. Why aren't we? What about the Food Sustainability Task Force? We haven't really heard much from them. I interviewed one guy, and it was a nothing burger. The whole presentation was like I'm so frustrated by the whole thing, but it sounds like you've got your priorities right, and I'd love to hear more about this. So we'll invite you back. We'll have you back on the program. It would be nice to have a 4-way debate between you and the other candidates on the Republican ticket, at least, to kind of figure out which of the Republicans we need to have in there. You probably have been one of the most prepared candidates that I've ever interviewed as far as having details and understanding it before. A lot of it is, well, I'll have to see it when I get there kind of thing. You've already done some of the math, and I definitely appreciate that.
Oh, thanks for having me, Michael. No, if you wait to see what happens or what you can do, there's already a plan. There's already an agenda waiting for you in Juneau. I've never really made a very good freshman. I want to roll with the juniors and the seniors.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to take more than just Cole to make the changes, says Ron. You have to vote for anyone that's not backed by special interests. I would agree with that. You have to back, you have to change, again, charter of changes, change the player, right? We've got to change those players out. And we have done a lot, but we can't keep sending a group back of people back there who just do business as usual. So, Cole, thank you so much, my friend. It was good information. Again, write that blog post and let me know when you do, and I'll let the listeners know they can go watch it. I mean, just a paragraph ahead of each one of those slides would give. And again, I think you'd be miles ahead of any other candidate at that point, because they're like, huh? What's he got? He's got a whole team working for him over there. No, it's just Cole. It's just Cole. You're the PowerPoint Excel Ranger, I think, at this point, All right. Thank you, Cole. Appreciate you coming on board.
Thanks, Michael. I got to get to work.
All right. We'll see you later. Cole Snodgress, our guest here on the program. Good stuff. Good stuff. Really, really appreciate that. Okay. Let me see if I can make this, thing work. This newfangled toy called a phone. Let's see if I can get that to make the proper phone calls as always here. There we go. Come on. Ring-a-dingy. There we go.
Was just going to text you. I was actually just starting to the UK. You going to call me?
Yeah, exactly. You gotta call me. Hey, one ringy-dingy. You picked it right up, so we're good to go. All right. So you all ready this morning?
Always.
Good.
Of course.
Good. Did you happen to listen to that last candidate? I'm just curious.
No, I've been studying, so I did not.
Okay.
Listen, who was it?
Cole Snodgress for District 36, Kronk seat. I mean, just pretty. I'll just say this: pretty damn impressive. Pretty damn impressive candidate. When he comes prepared with slides and discussions and talking points on budgets and educational spend and accountability, and I mean, it was pretty impressive. Let's just put it that way. Pretty darn impressive. You may want to go back and listen to the podcast. He could be a member of the squad. I don't know if we're going to call it the squad, but those fiscally minded people in the legislature, the handful of you in there that are just fiscally minded.
The squad. That's the wrong way, though.
I know.
Like the bad progressive communist.
What do we call it? The platoon, the fire team. It's got to be some kind of military.
Ooh, let me think about that.
Yeah,
there'd be a good one. Yeah,
the fire team, the element, the wing. I don't know. We've got to do something. It's All right. Mike Shower is our guest. We're going to jump back into this. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Here we go. Shower Hour of Power up next.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Oh, yeah. Live around the world on the interwebs at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Good morning. It's Wednesday. Gonna be beautiful out there. You ready to go? You ready to jump into it? We just finished up, by the way, with Cole Snodgress. If you didn't catch that interview, brand spanking new candidate for House District 36 up in the interior. And all I got to say is, wow. I mean, that guy was prepared. That was a fantastic, one of the best new candidate interviews I've ever done. Not necessarily from the technical standpoint of oratory or being a statesman, but for a guy who knows his stuff. I've never had a brand new, fresh candidate hit me with slides that he made based on state data to show where things could change. It was impressive. All right. I'm just saying. So you can go back and listen to it on the podcast, or if you want to see the slides, you can watch it on YouTube or Facebook. Just go back to my my YouTube or Facebook page and you can see today's show. Fantastic stuff. I highly recommend it. Highly recommend it. Meanwhile, hour 2 of our Wednesday edition of the program means that it's time for the shower hour of power. That's right. The one day a week that we get to sit in, let our hair down, and talk to our favorite people, one of our favorite people, and that would be State Senator Mike Shower, who joins us this morning to talk about, well, a little bit of everything. And I don't even know I have no clue what we're talking about today. So let's ask Mike what we're talking about today. Hello, Mr. Showers, sir. What's happening, Colonel?
Well, good morning.
How you doing?
Good morning. I'm doing.
Yeah.
Are you?
I'm doing right now.
Do you fondue?
Do you do? I do the fondue. Do you do the fondue? I love. Oh man, I love. I love fondue. Man, I love. I mean, I mean, this is a sidebar. I had never been to. I'd done fondue, a couple times when I was younger, but went to what's the place called? A Melting Pot. That's what it was. A fondue restaurant in Seattle. And I was like, oh, that was amazing. That is like.
This is why you never know what we're going to talk about.
I know.
It goes like this.
It's just stuff like this. I mean, it was just amazing. By Grapthar's hammer, I was impressed. All right. That and pop culture. Mike and I we're just two geeks in a pod. All right, Mike. What are we going to talk about today? What's on your mind? What is the burning thing that has just got your gullet today? What are you thinking about? What's on your mind?
Well, I mean, the first thing, obviously, that a lot of people are paying attention to that are interested or at least observant of politics in general are all of the races, right? Because there's a slew of them coming in on some of these primaries across the country, and who's winning and losing. Certainly, we're starting to ramp up, for we're not that far away from our own jungle primary. Thank you very much. Ranked voting. And so that's, I think, a lot of what, people are paying attention to. I mean, I'm certainly watching it. There's only so much you can do, right? Trying to help a little here and there and keep an eye on the candidates, see what we're doing. So that's one big thing. The other one's just watching some of the policy stuff that is creeping around and what's happening. And I've watched a podcast yesterday briefly, just a small segment of it, and it was talking about how, or just this little portion of it, the Biden administration is now crowing and claiming their victory for reducing the numbers on the border, right? He's basically done something that he had the authority to do and should have done 3.5 years ago, right? To keep the border crossings down to a manageable level. And now they're saying, look, it's been down for the last 3 weeks. But what they're not telling you was the last 3 years plus were historic highs,
right,
in our history.
Right.
People coming in. So this is like, he's like saying, look, I started our house on fire and I put out the front porch right there. So I saved the front porch right at the end, right? So there's a little bit left right there.
Yeah,
by the piece.
By the way, he utilized something that he had criticized the former president for. He decided to do it himself. Oh, that's wrong. That's wrong. Oh, here, let me do it. Now it's right. I mean, it's just, it's so hysterically hypocritical.
That's on everything, Mike. That's stuff like inflation. They're trying to say, oh, look what I did in inflation when, if it's the previous president or a Republican administration, oh, they don't have any control over that. That's because of what Congress did, or that's just because the economy is resilient. But when Biden does it, what does the press say? Oh, look, the inflation's down because of Biden, because he's done something. The thing, as he would say repeatedly in many of his speeches. And so, same thing about other issues with him of, look what I did, right, or what I've done, when in fact he's done nothing other than claim that things that have taken place are at historic bad numbers, whether it be illegal immigration, whether it be inflation, whether it be energy production, whatever the thing may be. And when it turns around in a case where he has no control over it, they're claiming victory. And when he does something like the border crossings where he could have policy impacts, he's doing it not because it's the right thing to do. He's doing it for politics. Biden is only doing this because he's lacking in the polls. He knows Americans are pissed off and angry about it. And so he's being advised by the people actually running him, because the guy is pretty much a puppet, and telling him what to do. And they're scared to death that Trump's going to win no matter what happens with the court, all the sham court cases. So this is fascinating to watch stuff with him. It's fascinating to watch those, like that guy Bowen, that nasty foul-mouthed guy from New York City, from the Bronx or whatever, who was, mother effer this, that, and the other, and he lost.
Jamal
liberal.
Jamal Bowen. Yeah, Jamal Bowen.
Yeah, Bowen to Latimer.
Yeah, he lost to a centrist. He lost to a more of a centrist party, which I think is, that's interesting, because I think that is kind of a repudiation in some ways and in some areas of this hard veer to the left on some members of the Democratic Party, that they're seeing, whoa, we need to be pulled back more to a centrist position, because they understand they've got to capture the independents. Neither the Republicans nor the Democrats are a majority or even a plurality in this country. The independents, the moderates, the libertarians, the middle of the roaders, that's where the power lies. And as you continue to veer one way or the other, whichever the Democrat, it's not going to help you. And that's what I think we're seeing here.
It's the swing votes for sure, out of that one. And, part of it they were talking about too, and AOC was struggling. There's a couple others that are struggling. These are the anti-Israel. And I think that PAC spent in that race, what did I see? They spent like $14 million.
$15 million, yeah. $15 million
on
that thing.
To go after that one race, because the guy is so anti-Semitic on this. And there's just the attack, I think it was Los Angeles or Orange County, somewhere just recently. I forget, maybe San Francisco or somewhere in California, of course, right? That's like Florida, man. It's got to be California in these cases. And that's another thing where there's the mayor there's embattled, that stuff going on, that Democrat mayor. There's just all these things happening that's fascinating. And I don't spend a lot of time, because I don't have that much time, but I just, I probably about an hour a day. I do a real quick case of different news sites and stuff in a couple podcasts for a few minutes, and just kind of get a feel for what's going on. And it's fascinating to watch, because the anti-Israel, anti-Semitism is affecting some of these races. The absolute lack of anything good for this country policy-wise by Democrats, progressive, communist, socialists, from President Biden on down, is absolutely at the top of the list. What people have said about the economy is still struggling, right? There's positive signs, but that, again, doesn't have anything to do with Biden. So you just see these things that are going on. I was just talking to a friend of mine that's a recently retired, very senior officer in the Air Force. We were discussing Ukraine because he was over there doing some help, some advising and things that are happening. And he's just talking about that. And that we got into the strategy back to, he's looking at Alaska because he's been stationed up here before. And these are recent conversations, like, things happening like right now. And just like, you're looking at it and going, I asked him, what about Gazprom, in Russia? He's like, I know, it's freaking crazy. He's like, the Biden administration, this is a senior military officer, right? Just retired. He's like, the Biden administration is killing us. He's like, because they are shutting down our ability to export gas. And so the Russians have leverage. And you wonder what's going on in Ukraine. You've heard me talk about this years ago. He was just validating some of the ideas. And I asked questions about, the fact that the NATO screwed up because they didn't let Ukraine in, nor did the EU. And then you get this war going on, right? And then Russia has leverage. Why? U.S. policy matters. And people sometimes question what I put like on social media. Again, because I'm trying to educate you. Because if you think it doesn't matter what's happening in the southern border, you're wrong. if you think it doesn't matter what we're doing with energy policy in this country for South Korea, Japan, and others countering China, you're wrong. If you're not paying attention to what's happening in Europe with Gazprom and how Russia has leverage and then the things they're doing around the world, then you're wrong. You're not paying attention. These things absolutely have a ripple effect that affect us, to include even immigration in smaller numbers, but don't think they're not showing up here, because they are. And so the point is just trying to get people to pay attention. So you asked, kind of your generic question was, what have I been paying attention to? These things right now, because, the legislative session's over, it's campaign season. So I'm just kind of paying attention broadly to the other things that are taking place. But Mike, some of these actually affect us here in Alaska, and things that we should be doing within, legislation and policy. When you start talking about energy, when you start talking about budgets, being able to weather the storm, those kinds of things matter for what the state does, like a fiscal policy, right? We go back to, there's some positive news on some resource development. I'm talking about companies and state land things, not from Biden and the federal government. Good luck. If he gets reelected, this state might as well, just put up a sign and say, go into Florida. I don't know, somewhere normal, because this place is going to be a big Long Trail National Park, because it's going to be hard for anybody to want to do business here. But the reality is that it does matter for us. And there's a lot of things like that we need to be doing. There's some hope for a gas line, which, if nothing, we need that for internal use, much less, liquefying it and sending it to Japan, South Korea, and others that can use it, right? Which we need that coal. We need to be looking at exporting, because China is building coal plants like crazy. Wouldn't it be nice to have some leverage over them when they start relying upon us for coal? How about flipping the tables for once, right?
Sure.
Instead of being on the wrong side of it.
Well,
a lot of little chess pieces moving like that.
Yeah.
We should be looking at.
Well, and I think we need to talk about this energy issue, because this is, it's problematic from a couple different perspectives. And what I see right now is we're playing this game of crisis management, or to be a little more cynical, maybe even creating the crisis management. I mean, we still don't have the secondary report out from the utilities. They did an initial report. They said, we'll have a lot more information on the secondary report, which is coming soon, TM. And it should have been out months ago, and we're not seeing it. So we don't know exactly when we're going to run out. We talk about, do we need to set up a short-term import? Do we need to do this? Do we need to do that? And yet everybody keeps coming back to this idea that, well, we just need to burn Alaska gas. I would love to burn Alaska gas, but I'm not emotionally tied to the fact that we need to burn Alaska gas. We need to keep people's heat on, their lights on. We need to keep that going on. We need to make it as inexpensive as possible. But if all we're going to do is subsidize it with state spending, we're just taking it from people in another way. We're just going to take it more from their dividend. Why aren't we looking at other options? Maybe a short-term option of import while we get our ducks in a row, so we're not in the middle of a crisis when this whole thing comes down.
I agree. We shouldn't be importing it. However, like you, the luxury to live in the utopian world of what should have happened and where we should be is not the reality that we have to deal with. So if we get to the point, Michael, where the only choice is to import gas to ensure we have the supply, then we're not going to do that. We're going to tell people there's no more gas.
Right.
You better go get a rush on those wood stoves before they're all gone, bought up. So I'm with you that we're going to have to do what we have to do. And part of this is, for example, big utopian dreams like the previous governor that wanted the big pipeline, the massive pipeline with China's involvement, basically funding most of it, and then having, a huge hammer to wield over us. Things like that shouldn't have been done. Had they been focused all this time on just a small ASAP line, just get it down to Fairbanks, for example, just get it here, get it started. Once you build it, it will come. We start having options from there, but that's not what we did. We keep going for these, massive big things, and then some of the stuff that are known issues that we've been doing forever that aren't what's right. We're not dangerous, but they're not the technically ones that are challenging, or they're not the ones that are like, ooh, that's out there ways. Not sure if Natty's going to support the price of a pipeline to liquefy and sell it to all these countries, because that was part of the question. Things like Watana Dam that could provide us, I've heard numbers 650 megawatts of clean energy, because it is, right? No, can't do that for 100 different reasons. Why it's terrible for the fish, it's terrible for this, it's that, so we can't just build a dam, right? Like we said before, we could build a refinery, a modern one, and sell our gas at a higher price to other people. We could, refine it. We don't want to do that. And that's technically, we've done that how many times all over the country and the world?
Right.
So some of these things that would alleviate our problems, and make us more sustainable and stable, we won't do. And while we look at big, grandiose projects that we may not be able to do or can't get the funding or they don't pencil out, excuse me, or like you said, are going to be put onto the taxpayer dime, whether it's taking more of the PFD or whatever it is to build a project. So one way or the other, we continue to kind of, take I was going to say one step forward, two steps back. I mean, we're just going backwards.
Yeah.
I don't think we're taking any steps forward. So those are challenges, and those are things that are frustrating because we need to be doing something. That same guy I was talking to recently and had that conversation, we also discussed micronuclear.
Right.
And he was crystal clear. He's like, that is our answer. He's like, even specifically Alaska, talking about deep water port, opening of the Arctic, and being able to support not just military and national strategic objectives in national defense, but the ability to produce power, in the remote areas at a cheap price. He's like, micronuclear is the way to go. He's been looking at that. They've been working on it, especially the military, deployable ones for years.
Well, I mean,
we're getting close.
This is the directions. These are all the directions we need to take. We'll continue this conversation. State Senator Mike Shower, our guest, The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense, Liberty-Based, Free Thinking Radio.
What is that?
Common Sense. Regularly heard on American radio. Michael Duke Show. Radio.
State Senator Mike Shower, our guest. I mean, Mike, I agree with you in one part to say, look, sometimes what they end up doing is they end up saying, well, we could build a bullet line or a pencil line or ASAP or whatever you want to call it. But again, what we really want to do is export gas. The problem is the economics of almost all of those don't work out in favor of actually getting them built. And let's say even they did. Let's say they're going to get a line to Fairbanks, an ASAP line to Fairbanks from the North Slope. I mean, it's a timing issue, right? I mean, how many years is it going to take to get FERC approval and everything else and the financing and the qualification? I mean, we should have been working on this years ago. We've all said that. We should have been working on this years ago, because now we're talking about, the intimation from the utilities is in 2 years, we could be facing rolling blackouts and gas shortages or pricing spikes or things like that. And yet everybody quits. They just stop talking about, well, we've got the Marathon plant. We could reverse it around, import the gas. And when I say short term, I'm talking about a 10-year solution. It's not technically short term. Donna's right. Donna says import is not a short term solution, but it is a solution. It is a solution that will keep the lights on in the meanwhile while we figure our crap out. Right?
Well, what is most government, Mike? Most government is crisis management. By design, almost.
Crisis creation.
We don't look at it. Well, creation and management, right? Because that's the problem. You don't want to ever solve the problem because they don't need you anymore, right? So that is certainly one of the things in the bureaucracy that drives us all mad. Those of us that want to just act and get things done is like, we're going to study this for 2 years, and then we're going to look at that study, and then we're going to think about it, and we're probably going to have another study to study, that thing that just keeps going and perpetuate the problem, because then we have a job, right? I'm here to solve those problems and fix them. For 40 years, right? I mean, look at Biden, 47 years in government service, really? And somebody put a meme out I saw yesterday. It's like, if a mechanic kept working on your car for 47 years and it still broke, would you hire him for 4 more years to fix your car? Probably not. So here's the point, Mike, is that all I'm looking at when I start talking about these things is you have to do whatever it is you have to do to survive the short term, right? And even 10 years on that scale, as I'm thinking, is short, because I'm always frustrated, as I've told you, by no vision, right? It's always 2 to 4 year cycles with us politically. Stop doing that. I want to look 25, 50, 75 years down the road, because that's where we should be looking, just like planning our roads, right? The Matsu. Oh my gosh, we saw growth coming years ago. We should have been building 4 lanes everywhere, but no, we're going to go a 2 lane until it looks like the 405 freeway in LA every day. And then we'll start going backwards and figuring out what we're going to do to fix the problem. So the reason I'm asking you to think, though, on the one side about building something here is that long term, if we don't start doing it now, there's an old Chinese saying, so the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. If we don't start doing it now, then the problem we're going to run into is somebody else is going to have leverage over us. We're going to be importing that gas from somewhere that could turn it off. We're going to be Russia and Europe and Gazprom again. So if we don't start doing the things now, we need to secure our own energy independence. our own ability to produce resources and the things we need for modern living, then in 10 years or 1 year or 1 month, we're going to find ourselves in a place going, oh crap, now they
Right.
pulled us over, they got us over
Well,
a barrel. So we have to be thinking long term too.
Well, and I agree with that. I mean, I supported the gas line initially when I was in Fairbanks. I was part of the whole movement to try and get that. I agree that the best plan is 20 years ago. We should have been talking about this. The problem is even then the economics weren't working out. And so that was part of the problem. So first of all, how do we pay for that? Second of all, you're the second legislator that I've heard say, we're going to be held hostage. They're going to cut us off. The largest exporter of gas is the United States. And if we have a contract, how are they going to cut us off? If we start importing gas, that's like saying they're going to cut us off from importing food. We get most of our food from the lower 48. How would they just flip the switch? I mean, in crisis time, a nuclear apocalypse, zombie world, we need to feed the cities. We're not going to feed Alaska. Okay, I could see that. But I mean, again, you're the second legislator I've heard who said that.
We'll discuss this because it's broader than what you're saying. But I know that the bell rung. So just like Christmas story, the bell rung. I have to put the bell rung. I can't sit here. So I'll have to wait to answer that until we're back.
Another angel just got his wings. That's what it's about right there. That's what happened, Mike. Another angel got its wings.
There you go. That's right.
I put new angels up every morning. Here comes another one. Right there. That another angel just got his wings. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
The Michael Duke Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
State Senator Mike Shower is our guest. The Shower Hour of Power continues. We're talking about whatever we want to talk about. We've been talking about energy. During the break, we were talking about, this potential for importation of gas, how it may be in the short term, and I'm talking about a 10-year short term, which for people in Alaska apparently is long term. But, it might be the way to keep us afloat and keep the lights and the heat on while we figure out what the hell we're going to do with our own gas here in the state. Because I agree, I think we should be burning our own gas, but we got to figure out a way to make it feasible. And Senator Shower said something along the same lines that Representative Vance said. Representative Vance said last time we talked to her when we were talking about importation of gas, and that is, well, they could just hold us hostage. They could just cut us off. And I'm thinking, at what point the gas we would be imported from the United States. The United States still the largest exporter of gas in the world. We would have contracts. That's like saying they would cut off our food because most of our food is imported from the lower 48. They could hold us hostage and cut off our food at any time. I mean, it seems to me like there's no real basis for that to happen. If we have a contract and it's on the water and these are only requiring 2 or 3 shipments a year with these huge LNG tankers, why would people throw the fear factor out there to say they could hold us? I mean, I understand Russia's doing that, but we're talking about from other people in the United States. Why does that keep coming up, Mike?
Because think more broadly is my point to this, Michael. It's not just about the gas, because natural gas is the topic that we're specifically discussing. But when you start thinking about strategy in the interplay in geopolitics, how things work out, if, for example, who controls most of the world's rare earth metals?
China.
Correct. Who controls most of the manufacturing of computer chips and things we need?
Yeah, ditto.
Who controls most of the shipbuilding and the parts that we even buy ourselves that we need?
Sure. I'm with you.
Okay, so here's my point is that as you start looking more broadly beyond just the natural gas issue, because you're correct, and I should have been more clear. I'm not talking just about natural gas. I'm talking strategically about being held hostage for the things that we might need because we are terrible playing chess, especially with somebody like Biden that can't even complete a coherent sentence as being run by others who are allowing other countries to hold these strategic leverages over our head, whether it be food production, whether it be energy production of all types, right? Whether it be production of natural resources that are needed, whether it be production of things that are already produced and made that we desperately need to survive. These are the interplay things that go back and forth, right? And if we cannot produce them ourselves, which is really what I'm saying, when I was saying about I get frustrated because we're on a 2 to 4 year cycle. We're not thinking 25, 50, 75 years down the road. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about our ability to produce stably and sustain everything that we need every time we don't build another refinery or a pipeline or create another mine that gives us the rare earth metals or just the basic metals that we need, every time we don't protect our food resource production, every time we're not even getting agriculture, for example, fertilizer, you know where most of the prime component of it comes from?
Where? China again?
Ukraine.
Ukraine. Okay.
But Russia takes that, and what do you think they're going to do on leverage? So here's my point, Michael. What I'm trying to say more broadly is that every step that we don't take, everything that we don't build or do or guarantee our access to is one more thing down the road. Somebody has leverage over us as a state and a nation to tell us what we will or won't do, to hold us hostage. It's not the only reason. It's part of why Japan went to war with us in World War II, because they did not have the oil and the natural resources like metal that they needed. We held that over their head. And Yamamoto even talked about it. It's like, we have about 6 months. We have to go to war right now. The United States is strangling us. We cut off oil production and the scrap metal they needed to produce their war machine. And it caused them to go to war. My point is, wars and other things happen certainly for these reasons as well. But
sure,
what the U.S. and the Alaska as a part of that should be doing is every project we can look at that we could be building now. The old 20 years ago, great, but if you didn't do it, well, today's the next best time. Start now. We should be doing these things because in Alaska, yes, food production important, right? Energy production for our own use is important, but our push that goes more broadly into the United States and being able to provide those resources to our country so we have that leverage so they can't leverage us, all of it matters. And this is where I get frustrated because I look at it and go, and I say nobody. There's plenty of people like my friend I was talking to, like I said, recently retired, very senior, officer, military officer, having that same discussion. Frustration. He's very frustrated about the fact that the current administration and more broadly, just the bureaucracy in general, it just isn't moving on some of these things. He made a comment about a current general officer who was he's just not leaning far enough forward. And what he means by that, because I know the saying from inside, is that he's very afraid to take any steps. He's afraid to rock the boat when we need to be looking at solutions and things that may upset some people and may rock the boat because we need to be doing that.
Right.
And so we are afraid to do anything is my point. We're afraid to build. We're afraid to look, if we got to build a pipeline, Mike, for our own use and it doesn't quite pencil out, oh, well, the answer isn't we rely on somebody else to give it to us and hope that works out. I mean, what if we have, and I'm kind of joking here, but what if we have the zombie apocalypse all of a sudden? Where's Alaska going to get it then? Or the food? I mean, so.
Well, then the question becomes the question becomes who pays for it? If it doesn't pencil out, and I'm with you, I understand what you're saying, but if it doesn't pencil out and you can't get the private equity investment that you need because the economics don't work, then who pays and how do we pay for it? That's been the biggest question.
Of course it is. And that puts you right back in that OODA loop circle where you come right back again, observe, orient, decide, act. That's what's called the old OODA loop. Robert Boyd, fighter pilot from back in the 60s and 70s and 80s. And you go right back to the same problem. Okay, so we don't have the ability to provide our own gas. Let's just say we don't. Because we can't get it. We don't have any transportation for it. We're burning it off on the slope and injecting it back underground. Carbon capture, right? They're already doing that. They've been doing that for years. That's nothing new when people get upset about it. And so we have to rely on somebody down south. And we go, well, so do we go back to this is going to sound funny coming from me, right? Do we go back to, we just can't afford to build that road on our own, so we're just not going to build it. Can't afford to build that bridge, we're just not going to build it. There are some capital projects that we have spent our money, because it is ours, right? It's business and private sector are the ones producing the wealth. Where the money's coming from is us. Whether it's big corporations or the middle class with taxes, whatever that is, we're the ones providing the resource, the money in this case. And we have for some time created projects on the capital infrastructure side, not always good, I admit, right? Not always needed.
Right.
But these things that we have done, many of them are because we've gone and said, we need that. Military bases, right? We need military bases. We need ships. We need things. Well, guess what? Those aren't really affordable things, and we're not really getting anything other than the security they may provide us from attack or invasion. But there are things we agreed we need to do. So I'm going back to, I'm looking at it and going, we need to be able to produce our own energy.
Right.
It may not pencil out with natural gas, but we need it. So do we provide some of our own funding? Do we get some grants from the federal government to make it work? So it's attractive enough to somebody to come and build it and operate it? Maybe that's the path, Mike. I'm not saying it's perfect, and I'm not saying I necessarily like it. But I'm looking at it and going,
Right.
It may be a necessary thing because of where we sit. If we don't have it, we're not all going to go back to heating our houses with wood stoves. That's not going to happen.
Right.
And electric is not the option because we're not producing enough of that either.
Right.
So
Well,
I go back to you with the question,
Yeah.
how do we do it if we don't have the money that we need? How do we do it?
And you've come back to the ground loop conundrum of the global markets, right? I mean, the global
Exactly.
markets, where the global markets are so intertied that different countries specialize and nobody can basically create everything they need themselves. And so we want to be self-reliant, but at the same time, we become so dependent on the cheaper ability to create these global. I mean, it is a conundrum. I'm not saying that it's easily fixable. But my question continues to become, if we are spending all the money we have right now and then some, and now we want to build a gas line, for example, as a piece of infrastructure, treating it like a road or a bridge or an airport or something like that, how does that get paid? Do we take more of the PFD? Do we cut into other programs? Do we reduce or cap government in other ways to pay for those things? I mean, because I guarantee you, if it's not a friendly federal government, you're not going to get any government grants to be able to do it. And then you're going to have the fights all the way on the FERC and the requirements and the permitting and crossing federal lands. And I mean, it's definitely an uphill battle. But like you said, we should have been fighting this years ago. So I guess it goes back to my main question of, do we in the short term, and in short term here, I mean maybe 10 years, do we in the short term stand up the rest of this importation facility, the Marathon, get that thing fixed, build the pipe and the storage and do whatever it needs to do to become an import facility rather than an export facility, and use that time as a buffer to figure the rest of this stuff out? That's my question.
Well, the legislature dithers over what to do and whether boys are boys and girls are girls. Noted.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess the question I have to that question, Michael, is, isn't that better than the heat going off? I mean,
that's what I'm saying.
We don't have a gas line built,
but everybody,
if we don't have the production here internally, what else are we going to do? You tell me. I don't know. But
but everybody seems to be avoiding the importation question. It's like the dirty thing in the room. Nobody wants to touch it or talk about it or anything else. I wouldn't be happy about it either. But we can't fetishize the use of Alaska gas in the meanwhile, while everybody goes dark or their energy bills double.
Of course,
we can't.
Well, that's a no-brainer. How are we saying that?
Well, but everybody, all the utilities, and the RCA is not involved. The utilities seem to be ignoring it. They talk about it as an if down the road, and the legislature keeps, some of the legislators that we've talked to keep talking about, we're going to get Alaska gas from the North Slope, or we're going to do, but that's
but we all know that's going to take years. Michael. That's not like overnight. You can't flip the switch.
Yeah,
what do you do in the meantime? You still have to prepare.
Why aren't we focusing more on that importation component, get that off the table so it's at least handled, so that we know in 36 months that it'll be online and ready to go, and then we have time.
I can't disagree with that.
Yeah.
I can't disagree with that because it's a better option than, look, it's the old saying, military both like it in a gunfight, right? I've said on this program many times. 2 is 1, 1 is none, right? Have a backup to your backup. You better have multiple plans, because if one doesn't work or one falls through or one breaks, then you find yourself with just one option. And if that doesn't work, then you're in real trouble, right? So we're back to it's why one of the reasons, maybe the primary reason I want to buy a bridge. Not so much go, it's a boondoggle, it's a bridge to nowhere. No, it's not. It's not, because it's going to help with the ports. It's going to help with growth. It's going to help with Wississippi access and all kinds of other things we can get. But what I'm most concerned about is having a backup. Because right now there's like 7 bridges, I think it is, between the Mat-Su and Anchorage, the economic heart engine of the entire state, and how people work and how many people work in Anchorage and military and all these things. And we have one road, and that's not a great option to me. I'd rather have another option, a bridge that opens up that access to somewhere else. So I go back to, this is how you should be thinking. This is how we should be operating. That what is our backup to the backup? What is our plan? Okay, we don't have a gas line, so we can't get enough of our gas to feed the interior. What do? Well, we're running out of it at the Cook Inlet, so it's getting kind of thin, and we're not drilling here and doing this, that, the other, federal, all the problems. Got it. So what's your backup plan? Well, your backup plan is we're going to start working here on this plant. We're going to set it up so that we have the ability to import gas as we need it until we can get our act together. Okay, cool. Now we have a backup plan. That's great. I agree with you. I mean, I'm laying it all out because that's the only real option. This one I think we probably have, that you better be ready.
Right. I mean, and I agree with that. We've got to be, I think, more realistic about talking about that plan B And you and I are really the only ones who. You're the first legislator that's really addressed that. So we're going to continue. We got to go. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. We continue right after this.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes.
Allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, in the break right now, Mike Shower is our guest. And then Kevin says, importing will take at least half a decade, 5 years, not 3. 36 months is not realistic. You can't change the direction in Dickiski. It takes a whole new building. Okay, great. So it's 5 years, Kevin. How long would it take to build a gas line from the North Slope? More than 5 years. That's what I'm saying. We've got to have a plan B. We've got to have that Bravo plan. We, in fact, should have plan B already set up and ready to go. So in case we can't get our poop in a group and get the gas from the North Slope in some equitable economic way, we've got, again, and then Sandy says, so if they import the gas, then they can cut us off. Cut it. Why do we keep hearing this? Oh, they can cut us off. First of all, they're capitalists. Why would they cut you off? Again, that's like saying we're going to cut off all your food because they didn't like us. They didn't like the cut of our jib. They didn't like the way we voted on something. Somebody said something offensive, so they cut off all the food to the state. That makes about as much sense. I'm sick of hearing that, oh, they're going to just cut us off. Now, if it was we were getting our gas from Russia, yeah, sure, they could cut us off tomorrow. This gas is coming from the U.S. If I hear that one more time, I'm going to freaking explode. Because, yes, sure, hypothetically, they could cut us off. Would they? Why wouldn't they just cut the food off first and starve us to death? It doesn't make any sense. Sorry.
Well, that's certainly true, Michael. I know what you're saying, and I don't think that people's concern is invalid, that something could happen to the supply. Maybe a better way to say it is the supply chain could be disrupted, right? Because for a fact, we saw that during COVID. We saw a lack of food coming our way. We were days from having no ships coming up here for both two reasons, not only COVID and people not working and no supplies, but a strike at the same time by the union workers, go figure, down out of Seattle and Portland. So there are multiple reasons why we could have a lack of supply. So back to the being concerned and being ahead of, or being prepared, you can think of it this way and go, well, what if something was to happen beyond our control that is a supply chain interruption and we don't have the supply? And of course, when would that happen? January, when it's minus 30. And maybe we find ourselves in a bad place. So it doesn't have to be that, a company that's supplying gas from lower 48 United States controlled fields would cut us off. It could be a thing beyond their control. There could be a massive earthquake off the West Coast that shuts down the ports.
I'm with you.
My point goes back to the more prepared we are, the better off we are.
I would
on
agree.
All of those issues, from food to energy to you name it. But when I was asking you on the previous break to discuss it, to think bigger is on the geopolitical realm. It's not just natural gas. It's a host of other things.
No,
and that's
I agree.
What we should really be working towards.
Well, and thinking of that larger scale, if that happens, just again, hypothetically, and somebody just said, well, who cut off Germany? Well, Russia cut off Germany. I just said if we were getting our gas from Russia, I could see that, Jeannie. Jeannie says, who cut off Germany? Russia did. But we're getting our gas from ourselves as far as internally. Mike's right, though. The supply chain is there's a fragility to it. That cascade effect that we've talked about in the past, the cascade can happen because we have simple, complex systems. And if something breaks down, we could lose it. I will say that if we do have that kind of breakdown where we would not get our natural gas because of some supply chain, we'd have bigger problems too, because we'd all be starving at the same time. So yes, we need to create food security. I'm not saying we don't. I'm not saying we don't need to tap our own gas and our own resources. I'm saying in the meanwhile, we probably should have maybe at that point, the in-state gas becomes plan B, the import is plan A. So that we can get plan A online and running, and then we put plan B into motion, because that's a 10, 15-year project, not a 3 to 5 year project. So maybe we need to do that.
So let's get to the brass tacks. Like everybody here is in their own way is not wrong. You're right. You should be having a backup plan. We should be looking at and moving on the don't plant. We didn't plant the tree 20 years ago. Okay, well, let's plant it today. Let's work on plan B. Let's work on what we can do to be prepared short term if something happens. But at the same time, we should be looking at all the other things too. We should be looking at building the gas line and liquefaction plant being ready. We should be looking at food security. We should be looking at all the things we said before without repeating them. Everybody here in their own way and portion of it is not wrong by what they are saying or contending. So this is the point that for you to say that, hey, we want to make sure that in the short term, that being 10-ish years, we have the ability to get supply if we need it. Well, that's not a bad idea. And, and I go back to the same thing. Well, who's going to pay for it? Maybe we don't have the money for that because we probably don't, because we keep spending more on all these government agencies. But that being said, maybe that's something we got to spend money on, Michael. I mean, because that's, again, I go back to, people don't want to spend money on something until we're in a crisis mode. It's like, oh my gosh, the electricity really is going to go out. The power really is going to, the heat's going to go up. Those are real issues that we could have if we don't continue to produce the things that we need, whether it's electricity via dams or micronuclear or anything else. So all of these things people get mad about them until it's too late. And then they complain about it. But I go, well, what were we doing 10 years ago? And that's
right.
Maybe what we're discussing today.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, I think we need to have a broader plan. I totally agree with you on that. Totally agree that we need to have a broader plan. And Kevin, yes, you're right. We don't have any U.S. flagged LNG tankers, but we fix that also by stopping in Canada on the way up. It's happened before. We can get around. It's a thing. All right.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
And before people get too wrapped up here, I'm not arguing with Mike. I mean, we're talking about basically the same thing, and I think we're in agreement. The bottom line is we need a broader plan. We need a broader, long-term plan that takes everything not in isolation, but in its totality, a holistic approach. And the problem is, I mean, I was talking specifically about one thing. Mike's talking about a broader thing. He's not wrong. I'm not wrong either. We need to get these things together. Would it be nice if Alaska was completely self-sufficient, had its own gas, had its own food production, yes, it would be fantastic. Can we do it? Well, in this market, that's a question mark, because if it's 3 times cheaper, for example, or 3 times more expensive to produce all of our food here, can people then afford to live here and still put groceries on the table? That's the conundrum that I was talking about earlier of the world markets, because you have places that specialize and export versus places that don't have the tools, or it's much more expensive to do. This is the problem.
Oh, Mike, come on. Yeah, we are far more expensive than some of these places that practically use slave labor to produce
Sure.
lithium, for example. Some of the African countries, or China's just raping Africa right now. They're just crushing it, as is Russia and others. They don't care, and they can produce it at a much cheaper cost than we can. But I go back to, okay, so what? So what? They do it with slave labor. They do it cheaply because they pay their people peanuts, and they don't have any kind of worker rights at all. And so we're just going to rely on that, because that's what a lot of the elites, the coastal elites in the left and right coast in this country do. Oh, they want their electric cars and they want all their fancy this, that, and the other, while they run around in private jets spewing carbon that they so-called worry about. And yet we're looking at this and going, and they get it all from these places overseas. And they just close their eyes. Hey, I'm an MD, not my backyard. I don't see that. So it's totally fine that I'm getting all these resources from child labor in Africa, but it makes me feel good as I drive my Tesla around. No, Mike, that's the height of hypocrisy. We should be doing it from our own country because we have the ability, we have the resources, but we have all these eco-extremists and environmentalists that don't want us to do it. And I look at those environmentalists and go, I don't think it means what you think it means, Pepe. I don't think having your lithium batteries and your cobalt and the rest of it that you need from child labor, if you could go pay attention to what's happening to some of these people and kids around the world that are providing resources for these elites running around doing what they're doing. Michael, they wouldn't be able to sleep at night. But the problem is they don't see it. They turn a blind eye to it.
Right.
And all the while I'm going, do it ourselves. We do it cleaner. We do it better. We actually pay our people reasonable wages in most cases that have rights and other issues. And they don't do that over there. But as long as people get that, cheap whatever from Walmart or wherever they're buying from, they're okay with that. And I'm just looking at it and going, well, that's not a good answer. Not only is it not a good answer for the environment, actually, so they're hypocrites, right? Because they're worried about environmentalism with their electric vehicles and electric everything, but they don't know what it's doing to the environment, mining, and the rest of it that they hate so much. But at the same time, I'm looking at it and going, it gets back to, if you're relying on these other countries, these other places to produce this stuff, if that stops for whatever reason, name the reason, then we're going to find we don't have the ability to do any of that ourselves, because we're not mining, drilling, producing, building. And if we don't, and somebody else either won't do it for us or holds us hostage because there's a conflict, a war, or the supply chain falls apart, or COVID 2025, COVID 2030, whatever the next one is, well, then we're in the same problem because we're not doing it. And like I said, and by the way, like I said, I go back to, we do it better. I mean, nobody does oil better on the planet than Alaska does as far as the amount of rules and regulations we have to live under. So long conversation, but the reality is we should be doing it, and it is frustrating when we are not. So I wish that we would get off our rear end and quit being afraid to build things and go back to that again, because that's what it takes. And that's where we are in this world. And let's be honest, Michael, this is not a stable world we're living in right now. This world is highly unstable right now.
Volatile.
All over the planet.
Yeah.
All over the planet. Look at Ukraine and Russia. Look at Taiwan and China, which is bubbling under the surface right now. Hong Kong, with this happening. Look at, the Hamas war in Israel, things happen. Look at our southern border. I mean, Mike, it is bubbling on things all over the place right now. So anyways, then the one way you prepare for that is you be able to produce everything that you need without having to rely on anybody else. But that's a nice pipe dream.
Well, I mean, and that's the problem. I mean, you talk about the unfair labor practices and the slavery and we've had how many elite, clothing designers have been popped for using, sweatshops in Singapore or someplace, and people are still like, I'm still going to buy that Prada bag or that Coach thing or the Air Jordans or whatever, even though they're being done. You're talking about human nature, and it's out of sight, out of mind. I agree. I don't want to buy those things either when they're produced like that. But human nature becomes: is it cheaper? Have I seen it? Do I care about it? And the true answer is probably, for the most part, no. And that's the problem. And again, that's the problems with the idea of a global market. In a utopian ideal, a global market would be so interconnected that their self-interest would prevent them from going to war or doing something like that over it, because it would affect their markets. But it's not working out that way. And I wish I had an answer. That's the thing. I wish I had an answer to how to have people see that. Yes, it may cost a little more, but you could do it yourself. And you would be prepared if an asteroid hit the planet tomorrow and wiped out the supply chain. You would at least be prepared to survive in the aftermath of something like that. But it's
speaking
tough.
of the asteroid thing, I mean, let's speak of that for a minute. Why is it? Why is it always in the movies? It's got to hit the United States. How come it doesn't hit one of these other countries that are bad players in it? Let's make a movie where they wipe out, like Iran. For a change, or some other nefarious country. How about that one?
Well, you love how they always hit the United States, but the fact that 70% of the world is covered in water, they just like, what, you didn't drop one in the ocean? Okay, maybe you dropped one out of a dozen, but only one. Most of them would hit the water, which again would
always got to hit the United States.
Always got to
just go somewhere else for a change.
We're
right?
So
make
evil.
a movie about that.
We're so evil. Oh, that's what it is.
So let me go to another thing here, and you'll get where I'm going with this. So
okay,
we're dealing with some issues, but I'm reading
3 minutes. 3 minutes.
I know. No, it'd be fast. It's memory loss that disrupts daily life. Alzheimer's Association, Alzheimer's versus dementia. Alzheimer's is one of the things that causes dementia. It's the highest cause. But what are some things that you get some of the top signs? Most common signs of Alzheimer's or early dementia, especially recently forgetting recently learned information, forgetting important dates or events, asking the same questions over and over, and increasing the need to rely on memory aids. It's got difficulty completing familiar tasks. Sometimes they may have trouble going to familiar locations, et cetera, confusion with time or place. It's got trouble understanding visual images, spatial relationships, like walking up steps, new problems with words and speaking or writing, misplacing things and losing the ability to retrace some steps, decreased rapport judgment, which are all in change of mood. Does that describe anybody that you know?
Gee, your hair smells terrific. Yeah, no, The sniffer in chief, I think, is who you're trying to describe there. It seems like all these different things. Although, don't worry, CNN tells us it's just cheap fakes. It's not really,
That's why I'm bringing it up, Michael, because you asked what I've been paying attention to, and I'm watching this whole deep fake push. The entire establishment is trying so hard to blind you. And I saw a meme from Patriot Post. I gotta push it out on social media for fun, and it's got a picture of an apple. It said, "This is not an apple." It said, and at the bottom it's got a disclaimer. It says, "If you see an apple, then you're a right-wing conspiracy theorist." Right? It's really an orange, is what the meme starts out as, and so. But isn't that true right now? What we're seeing, it's like everybody that's looking at this I can go online in 3 minutes and read this and go, that's exactly what he's facing. I'm not excited or about it. It's a terrible thing for anybody or family to deal with.
Right.
But it's crystal clear when you watch that guy or anybody else suffering from that terrible disease of dementia and Alzheimer's, that's probably what we're witnessing. And there's a lot of experts out there, because I'm certainly not one, that have basically diagnosed the guy by just watching them and going, that's what we're seeing here. And while that's not, like I said, there's nothing good about this. My point is, why are they pushing somebody like that to be the president of a powerful first world nation? It doesn't make any sense to me. Anybody can see it, that, these are the things. So I bring it up, and I was kind of, being a little bit facetious and joking about it. Not that there's anything to joke about that, but my point goes back to them. Why are they doing this? Because you look at the guy stumbling, and he's having a hard time with language and with the words, and he's lost, and you can see the mental fog, and it's like, this is not a good this is so dangerous.
It's elder abuse.
I go back
it's elder abuse.
Well,
why do they do it?
But
why do they do it? Because they can control him. That's why. That's
kind of my point, right?
Yeah.
You look back to what Obama said back in 2012 in that interview, I think it was, or 2014. He goes, to have Joe Biden in there would be my third term, and I'd be able to run him and do what I want and continue my policies, which is him and others are causing this. Busted, right? But the point is, it's very disheartening to see them doing this.
We got to go.
We're out of time.
State Senator Mike Shower. We're out of time. We'll see you tomorrow, folks. Have a great day. We're out of time. 3 minutes is not 7 minutes, Shower. Jeez, it's gonna buy you a watch or something.
No, that's not gonna work.
Yeah,
you'll just have to cut me off.
Yeah, just have to smack it down. Kevin says, with the coming recession, we need to start growing vegetables instead of electing them. I mean, he's not wrong. He's not wrong at this point. Yeah. Look, this whole
as sad as that is, it's not untrue.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like I said, the Muppet in Chief continues here with the thing, although he's not warm and fuzzy like a Muppet usually. So maybe that's wrong. All right. Final thoughts, Mike Shower. There's no time limit on this, but I'm just saying I do have to go to work today sometime. So, final thoughts before I.
Well, I think I'll end it like we started, Michael. I'm mostly paying attention to the candidates running both in Alaska and nationally, because that's, they're the ones that control policy, and that's going to affect us. I'm certainly keyed on a lot of the Senate races in Alaska to see, what the state Senate looks like, because that's obviously very important for us. If we hold the House and have a governor that's a Republican, you could have a trifecta. If we can elect some that will come together and get over any differences, so we could have a Republican control the Senate, having all three of those together would be significant for us on moving some things. So I'm obviously paying attention to that. I'm watching the national stuff to see how that's going to affect us, and there's a lot at play. So I mean, that's as good as anywhere to end it, I suppose, because you're going to impose some draconian time limit on me. But it is worthy of your time.
I don't work for the federal government. I don't do draconian. I don't work for the federal government. So I mean, just or the state government at this point.
I just want to slip that word in there somewhere, because I love that word, draconian.
Draconian.
So cool.
All I could think of is the dragon's wings as you come down draconic. Look, Mike, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, I think we should, coulda, woulda, shoulda. We should have built the damn gas line when we were building taps. We should have done, there's a ton of things we should have done, but we didn't get it done. Yesterday, we were talking about the if. McCabe was saying, well, if we had built a rail to Port McCabe, if we built a rail to the North Slope, we could be running gas cars. If they had built a railroad next to the Alcan, they could have shipped up all that war material on the rails as well as if you're right, we should have had more long-term planning. We should have done it better. When we were spending the money, we should have spent more and got it done, but we didn't. And so here we are. And how do we fix it? That's the hugest part of this problem right now. And I know that's not.
And that's it. That's it in a nutshell, Michael. That's it. That we didn't plant the tree 20 years ago. So the next best time is today. So let's do it now. I mean, we are behind. There's no denying it. But to do nothing because you're behind and not sure what to do and just throw a Band-Aid over it isn't the best answer either. Start now.
Yeah.
And it's going to take years and it's going to take money and nobody's going to like any of that. But the reality is, then if we don't, then our children 20 years from now are going to be looking back and going, those idiots didn't do it when they could have and should have again.
Yep.
So let's start it now. Get it moving. Don't be the parents and grandparents that our kids and grandkids are going to be looking at and going, those knuckleheads didn't do any better than the previous ones. Let's not do that. Okay. For a change.
Yeah.
Let's actually get it done. Start now.
Let's do it to it. Well, now if we could just get 59 other people to agree with you, maybe we could make something happen. I just think that's the thing.
Yeah.
Why aren't
21 and 11? I'll be happy.
Why aren't you a better orator? I mean, come on, you could convince people. If only you could get up there and.
Yeah, there's a couple people listen to the program, Mike. If they would just get elected, I'm sure they would go there and snap their fingers, and people would just jump to and say how high, and it would all be done overnight. It'd be solved. I'm sure of it. I have no doubt whatsoever.
I'm sure that's all it is. If I could only get those 32 plus the governor, and I could just walk in there, wave my magic wand, and it's all better.
That's right. It's just we're just not effective, Mike. We're just not effective. It's our fault, and that's what it is. It's not that, if they just had the right people in there, then you would convince all those other people and they would be kumbaya and it would work like a champ, which, of course, anybody that says so shows a complete lack of understanding of our political process.
Yeah, well.
And three branches that are naturally designed to be in conflict with each other, and a Republican and Democrat Party designed to be in conflict with each other, which they are, and a Republican Party itself that seems to not be able to come together when it's important. So, we got that going for us.
Look, if I was Mr. Purple, I could push everybody to do exactly what I wanted. Wouldn't that be great? All right. We are out of time. My draconian time limit has snapped in. We got to go. Mike, thanks, my friend. That was fun. That was lively. That was entertaining. And I look forward to doing it again, maybe next week.
Good show, my friend. Take care. Hopefully so.
All right. We'll see you then. Thanks so much. Mike Shower, our guest. We're out of time. We got to go. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Don't forget tomorrow, Corey DeAngelis is going to be joining us, as well as Scott Kohlhaas. We'll have a lot more discussions then. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. We will see you tomorrow. Be kind, love one another, live well.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.